Well, climate change is quite important to the city of Johannesburg, and largely because we are such a large component of the economy of the country. And as you know, nationally, there's an objective to reduce our carbon emissions by 34% by 2020 and 42% by 2025. And so Johannesburg has to play its role. And we've been a part of the C40 since its inception, and looking at how to address climate change issues. So climate change, in fact, will have an impact on events, normal climatic events. So you'll have much more intense rainfalls, floods that will occur. They would have droughts would be much more intense, and preparing for that is one of the programs in the climate change agenda. But it's also a part of what the city has done in developing our Joburg 2040 strategy. The concept of climate change has been put into that agenda. So as we address the day-to-day issues of the city, we're also looking at climate change. So we don't separate it between providing basic services for people, addressing the needs of the poor, looking at food security, those kinds of issues are just as important as addressing the long-term impacts of climate change. Well, let's make it relatively, to link it to the program that government has had, both nationally, provincially, and also locally. The question of electrification is really about addressing also climate change, because if you don't electrify communities, people will burn coal, they will cut down trees, and as a consequence will have an impact on the environment. But coal in particular, in Johannesburg, has been a real health issue. So 50% of children were born with asthma because of the impact of emissions from coal fires, etc., in all of our townships. And as you probably know, if you were to visit the townships 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe a little longer, you would find that you couldn't go there at night because of the smoke. I mean, I shouldn't say you couldn't go there at night. You could go there at night, but you wouldn't see very well. So if you didn't know the neighborhood, you'd get lost. And that's one of the things that's really started to change. So it has a direct impact on people's lives now. So electrification is one issue, but you have to balance that with the fact that South Africa is one of the larger we're about the 13th largest in the world, and it's because of electricity. So it's kind of a catch-22 that we're in, and so you do have to have long-term strategies to address that problem. So our contribution from transport to the overall emissions in Johannesburg is about 26%. And of that 26%, 43% is from private cars, and another 25% are from heavy goods vehicles. So it's not necessarily poor people that are contributing to that. So one of the key things that Joburg is undertaking is really what we call transit-oriented development. And the mayor has referred throughout the conference to corridors of freedom, where we want to create a more efficient city, a city that links the townships to jobs, links the suburbs to jobs, and ensure that people use public transport. So the Gautrain has been one of those initiatives that the provincial government has done to create and get people out of cars. We have put in the BRT. We've got phase 1A, which goes into Soweto, phase 1B, which is along Empire Perth, which goes past the universities also into Soweto. And we'll be rolling out phase 1C, which is along Louis Botha as our next corridor. And each of those corridors, we want to increase the density of people living along those corridors to ensure that, one, the transport works more efficiently, but two, that people are closer to work opportunities, to leisure opportunities, and they live in the same neighborhood. So we've got this slogan that we say we want people to live, work and play in the same area. And it's a key strategy to address both transportation, but also to address climate change, making people use public transport as opposed to private transport. Well, in terms of the initiatives that we're undertaking, we've introduced the BRT, and there's still many others, and that BRT came from one of the cities in the Curitiba, had this rapid transit system, and it's being introduced in many cities across the world, including some of the developed cities, but Joburg is quite advanced in doing that. So we're doing fairly well on many of these initiatives, and so that we can address these issues of climate change, but also when you talk about the transport corridors, it's also addressing inequality of the apartheid system that created that the poorest of the poor live the furthest from the jobs, and as a result they spend 50 to 60% of their money on food and transport. So it's also about putting disposable income in people's pockets. That's really one of the key issues, and our network helps us to do that. We work with other cities, they give us ideas as to how to better achieve these goals.